Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to ask for a bit of support. If you would like to support Sleepy Time Tales, to help me keep it ad-free and going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, please consider supporting it on Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. From as little as $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on the main episodes, so that you get your fresh sleep aid on a Wednesday instead of a Sunday. And $5 a month gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all the month's releases in one big listen. But of course, a monthly might seem a big ask, and if that's the case, then you can make once-off tips through buymeacoffee.com/sleepytimetales, or use the tip jar on the website. I've also got some merchandise up on a TeePublic store, which you can reach through the show notes or via the website, sleepytimetales.net. But another huge way to help the show, besides reaching into your pockets and taking some money out, is simply to spread the word. If you know someone who needs help sleeping, you can just tell them about Sleepy Time Tales, to help me to do my small part, for us to do our small part, in improving their lives. Of course, if you tell people on social media, please make sure to tag me in at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter, so that I can see and I can thank you. Of course, I've got to shout out the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. The music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. Thanks for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange thing, this strange idea, this podcast you're supposed to fall asleep to? But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with the anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or maybe sometimes background noise or company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you, without any pressure of the end coming. Now, as far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. The primary idea is that it gives you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties, to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. But maybe you need something a little bit different. Maybe you just need some kind of background. People these days often like white noise generators, or whale songs, or sounds of the ocean, or the wind in the trees, or maybe just some boring dude droning on in the background. What's important, though, is that you don't try to force the sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it's important that you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night, this probably actually won't work for you. I suggest giving it a few nights, at least 3, to try get used to the idea of listening to my voice, the strangeness of the idea, or getting used to my accent. It's also possible that early on, maybe one episode isn't long enough. Or maybe your problem isn't so much going to sleep. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because it's what works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. In your podcatcher of choice, download a whole bunch of episodes, playlist them all, and then start with the latest and let them go. That way, if you find yourself awake staring at the ceiling, you can just pop your earbuds back in and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. Sorry, I just had to pause there a moment. It's raining very hard here, and there's lightning and thunder. It's quite beautiful and quite spectacular. The equipment that I buy and that I use to record the podcast is deliberately not super sensitive so that I don't pick up background noise and stuff like that. And it's a bit of a shame, actually, that I don't think I would be able to let you hear what I'm hearing, because it's really pretty amazing. Oh, anyway, where was I? Actually just took a quick listen back, and you can actually hear the thunder there, and just for fun, tonight I'm going to leave it in. Back to where we were. Sometimes I even wake up 30 minutes before my alarm, and I do the same thing as if it was 3 a.m. Carry on listening, go back to sleep again. And you may wonder what the point is. What good is 30 minutes of extra sleep? But I can tell you now, and I've had people thank me for making this suggestion, that an extra 30 minutes, there's something about that, allowing yourself complete relaxation right before the alarm, that's satisfying on a whole new level. But it's very important that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you, so give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. This week, we return to The Last Man by Mary Shelley. In what fitting terms of wonder and delight, in what choice expression and soft flow of language, can I usher in the loveliest, wisest, best? How in poor assemblage of words convey the halo of glory that surrounded her, the thousand graces that waited, unwearied on her. The first thing that struck you on beholding that charming countenance was its perfect goodness and frankness. Candor sat upon her brow, simplicity in her eyes, heavenly benignity in her smile. Her tall, slim figure bent gracefully as a poplar to the breezy west, and her gait, goddess-like, was as that of a winged angel, new alit from heaven's high floor. The pearly fairness of her complexion was stained by pure suffusion. Her voice resembled the low, subdued tenor of a flute. It is easiest, perhaps, to describe a contrast. I have detailed the perfections of my sister, and yet she was utterly unlike Idris. Perdita, even where she loved, was reserved and timid. Idris was frank and confiding. The one recoiled to solitude that she might there entrench herself from disappointment and injury. The other walked forth in open day, believing that none would harm her. Wordsworth has compared a beloved female to two fair objects in nature, but his lines always appeared to me rather a contrast than a similitude. A violet by a mossy stone, half hidden from the eye, fair as a star when only one is shining in the sky. Such a violet was sweet Perdita, trembling to entrust herself to the very air, cowering from observation, yet betrayed by her excellences, and repaying with 1,000 graces the labour of those who sought her in her lonely bypath. Idris was at the Star, set in single splendor in the dim anadem of balmy evening, ready to enlighten and delight the subject world, shielded herself from every taint by her unimagined distance from all that was not like herself, akin to heaven. I found this vision of beauty in Perdita's alcove, in earnest conversation with its inmate. When my sister saw me, she rose, and taking my hand, said, "He is here, even at our wish. This is Lionel, my brother." Idris arose also and bent on me her eyes of celestial blue, and with grace peculiar said, "You hardly need an introduction. We have a picture, highly valued by my father, which declares at once your name. Verney, you will acknowledge this tie, and as my brother's friend, I feel that I may trust you." Then with lids humid with a tear and trembling voice, she continued, "Dear friends, do not think it strange that now, visiting you for the first time, I ask your assistance, and confide my wishes and fears to you. To you alone do I dare speak. I have heard you commended by impartial spectators. You are my brother's friends, therefore you must be mine. What can I say? If you refuse to aid me, I am lost indeed." She cast up her eyes while wonder held her auditors mute. Then, as if carried away by her feelings, she cried, "My brother, beloved, ill-fated Adrian, how speak of your misfortunes? Doubtless you have both heard the current tale, perhaps believe the slander, but he is not mad. Were an angel from the foot of God's throne to assert it, never, never would I believe it. He is wronged, betrayed, imprisoned. Save him. Verney, you must do this. Seek him out in whatever part of the island he is immured. Find him, rescue him from his prosecutors, restore him to himself, to me. On the wide earth I've none to love but only him." Her earnest appeal, so sweetly and passionately expressed, filled me with wonder and sympathy. And when she added, with thrilling voice and look, "Do you consent to undertake this enterprise?" I vowed with energy and truth to devote myself in life and death to the restoration and welfare of Adrian. We then conversed on the plan I should pursue, and discussed the probable means of discovering his residence. While we were in earnest discourse, Lord Raymond entered unannounced. I saw Perdita tremble and grow deadly pale, and the cheeks of Idris glow with purest blushes. He must have been astonished at our conclave, disturbed by it, I should have thought. But nothing of this appeared. He saluted my companions, and addressed me with a cordial greeting. Idris appeared suspended for a moment, then with extreme sweetness said, "Lord Raymond, I confide in your goodness and honour." Smiling haughtily, he bent his head and replied with emphasis, "Do you indeed confide, Lady Idris?" She endeavoured to read his thought, and then answered with dignity, "As you please. It is certainly best not to compromise oneself by any concealment." "Pardon me," he replied, "if I have offended. Whether you trust me or not, rely on my doing my utmost to further your wishes, whatever they may be." Idris smiled her thanks and rose to take leave. Lord Raymond requested permission to accompany her to Windsor Castle, to which she consented, and they quitted the cottage together. My sister and I were left, truly like two fools, who fancied that they had obtained a golden treasure, till daylight showed it to be lead. Two silly, luckless flies, who had played in sunbeams and were caught in a spider's web, I leaned against the casement and watched those two glorious creatures, till they disappeared in the forest glades, and then I turned. Perdita had not moved. Her eyes fixed on the ground, her cheeks pale, her very lips white, motionless and rigid. Every feature stamped by woe, she sat. Half frightened, I would have taken her hand, but she shudderingly withdrew it, and strove to collect herself. I entreated her to speak to me. "Not now," she replied. "Nor do you speak to me, my dear Lionel. You can say nothing, for you know nothing. I will see you tomorrow. In the meantime, adieu." She rose and walked from the room, but pausing at the door and leaning against it, as if her overbusy thoughts had taken from her the power of supporting herself, she said, "Lord Raymond will probably return. Will you tell him that he must excuse me today, for I am not well? I will see him tomorrow if he wishes it. And you also. You had better return to London with him. You can there make the inquiries agreed upon concerning the Earl of Windsor, and visit me again tomorrow, before you proceed on your journey. Till then, farewell." She spoke falteringly and concluded with a heavy sigh. I gave my assent to her request, and she left me. I felt as if, from the order of the systematic world, I had plunged into chaos, obscure, contrary, unintelligible. That Raymond should marry Idris was never more than ever intolerable. Yet my passion, though giant from its birth, was too strange, wild, and impracticable for me to feel at once the misery I perceived in Perdita. How should I act? She had not confided in me. I could not demand an explanation from Raymond without the hazard of betraying what was perhaps a most treasured secret. I would obtain the truth from her the following day. In the meantime. But while I was occupied by multiplying reflections, Lord Raymond returned. He asked for my sister, and I delivered her message. After musing on it for a moment, he asked me if I were about to return to London, and if I would accompany him. I consented. He was full of thought, and remained silent during a considerable part of our ride. At length he said, "I must apologize to you for my abstraction. The truth is, Ryland's motion comes on tonight, and I'm considering my reply." Ryland was the leader of the popular party, a hard-headed man and in his way eloquent. He had obtained leave to bring in a bill making it treason to endeavour to change the present state of the English government and the standing laws of the Republic. This attack was directed against Raymond and his machinations for the restoration of the monarchy. Raymond asked me if I would accompany him to the house that evening. I remembered my pursuit for intelligence concerning Adrian, and knowing that my time would be fully occupied, I excused myself. "Nay," said my companion, "I can free you from your present impediment. You are going to make inquiries concerning the Earl of Windsor. I can answer them at once. He is at the Duke of Athol's seat at Dunkeld. On the first approach of his disorder, he travelled about from one place to another, until, arriving at that romantic seclusion, he refused to quit it, and we made arrangements with the Duke for his continuing there." I was hurt by the careless tone with which he conveyed this information, and replied coldly, "I am obliged to you for your intelligence, and will avail myself of it." "You shall, Verney," said he, "and if you continue of the same mind, I will facilitate your views. But first witness, I beseech you, the result of this night's contest, and the triumph I am about to achieve, if I may so call it, while I fear that victory is to me defeat. What can I do? My dearest hopes appear to be near their fulfillment. The ex-queen gives me Idris. Adrian is totally unfitted to succeed to the earldom, and that earldom in my hands becomes a kingdom. By the reigning God, it is true. The paltry earldom of Windsor shall no longer content him, who will inherit the rights which must forever appertain to the person who possesses it. The Countess can never forget that she has been a queen, and she disdains to leave a diminished inheritance to her children. Her power and my wit will rebuild the throne, and this brow will be clasped by a kingly diadem. I can do this. I can marry Idris. He stopped abruptly. His countenance darkened, and its expression changed again and again under the influence of internal passion. I asked, "Does Lady Idris love you?" "What a question," replied he, laughing. "She will, of course, as I shall her when we are married." "You begin late," said I, ironically. "Marriage is usually considered the grave and not the cradle of love. So you are about to love her, but do not already." "Do not catechize me, Lionel. I will do my duty by her, be assured. Love, I must steel my heart against that, expel it from its tower of strength, barricade it out. The fountain of love must cease to play, its waters be dried up, and all passionate thoughts attendant on it die. That is to say, the love would rule me, not that which I rule. Idris is a gentle, pretty, sweet little girl. It is impossible not to have an affection for her, and I have a very sincere one. And you do not speak of love. Love, the tyrant and the tyrant queller. Love, until now my conqueror, now my slave. The hungry fire, the untamable beast, the fanged snake. No, no, I will have nothing to do with that love. Tell me, Lionel, do you consent that I should marry this young lady?" He bent his keen eyes upon me, and my uncontrollable heart swelled in my bosom. I replied in a calm voice, but how far from calm was the thought imaged by my still words. "Never. I can never consent that Lady Idris should be united to one who does not love her." "Because you love her yourself." "Your lordship might have been spared that taunt. I do not, dare not love her." "At least," he continued haughtily, "she does not love you. I would not marry a reigning sovereign, were I not sure that her heart was free. But, O Lionel, a kingdom is a word of might, and gently sounding are the terms that compose the style of royalty. Were not the mightiest men of olden times kings? Alexander was a king. Solomon, the wisest of men, was a king. Napoleon was a king. Caesar died in his attempt to become one. And Cromwell, the Puritan and king-killer, aspired to regality. The father of Adrian yielded up the already broken sceptre of England, but I will rear the fallen plant, join its dismembered frame, and exalt it above all the flowers of the field. You need not wonder that I freely discover Adrian's abode. Do not suppose that I am wicked or foolish enough to found my purposed sovereignty on a fraud, and one so easily discovered as the truth or falsehood of the Earl's insanity. I am just come from him. Before I decided on my marriage with Idris, I resolved to see him myself again, and to judge the probability of his recovery. He is irrevocably mad." I gasped for breath. "I will not detail to you," continued Raymond, "the melancholy particulars. You shall see him and judge for yourself. Although I fear this visit, useless to him, will be insufferably painful to you. It has weighed on my spirits ever since. Excellent and gentle as he is, even in the downfall of his reason, I do not worship him as you do. But I would give all my hopes of a crown and my right hand to boot to see him restored to himself. His voice expressed the deepest compassion. Thou most unaccountable being, I cried, whither will thy actions tend in all this maze of purpose in which thou seemest lost? Whither indeed? To a crown, a golden begemmed crown, I hope, and yet I dare not trust, and though I dream of a crown and wake for one, ever and anon a busy devil whispers to me that it is but a fool's cap that I seek, and that were I wise I should trample on it, and take in its stead that which is worth all the crowns of the East and presidentships of the West. And what is that? If I do make it my choice, then you shall know. At present, I dare not speak, even think of it. Again he was silent, and after a pause turned to me laughingly. When scorn did not inspire his mirth, when it was genuine gaiety that painted his features with a joyous expression, his beauty became supereminent, divine. Fernie, said he, my first act when I become King of England will be to unite with the Greeks, take Constantinople and subdue all Asia. I intend to be a warrior, a conqueror. Napoleon's name shall veil to mine, and enthusiasts, instead of visiting his rocky grave and exalting the merits of the fallen, shall adore my majesty and magnify my illustrious achievements. I listened to Raymond with intense interest. Could I be other than all ear to one who seemed to govern the whole earth in his grasping imagination, and who only quailed when he attempted to rule himself? Then on his word and will depended on my own happiness, the fate of all dear to me. I endeavored to divine the concealed meaning of his words. Perdita's name was not mentioned, yet I could not doubt that love for her caused the vacillation of purpose that he exhibited. And who was so worthy of love as my noble-minded sister? Who deserved the hand of this self-exalted king more than she, whose glance belonged to the Queen of Nations? Who loved him as he did her, notwithstanding that disappointment quelled her passion, and ambition held strong combat with his. We went together to the house in the evening. Raymond, while he knew that his plans and prospects were to be discussed and decided during the expected debate, was gay and careless. A hum like that of 10,000 hives of swarming bees stunned us as we entered the coffee-room. Knots of politicians were assembled with anxious brows and loud or deep voices. The aristocratical party, the richest and most influential men in England, appeared less agitated than the others, for the question was to be discussed without their interference. Near the fire was Ryland and his supporters. Ryland was a man of obscure birth and immense wealth, inherited from his father, who had been a manufacturer. He had witnessed, when a young man, the abdication of the king, and the amalgamation of the two houses of Lords and Commons. He had sympathized with these popular encroachments, and had been the business of his life to consolidate and increase them. Since then the influence of the landed proprietors had augmented, and at first Ryland was not sorry to observe the machinations of Lord Raymond, which drew off many of his opponent's partisans. But the thing was now going too far. The poorer nobility hailed the return of sovereignty as an event which would restore them to their power and rights, now lost. The half-extinct spirit of royalty roused itself in the minds of men, and they, willing slaves, self-constituted subjects, were ready to bend their necks to the yoke. Some erect and manly spirits still remained, pillars of state, but the word republic had grown stale to the vulgar ear, and many, the event would prove whether it was a majority, pined for the tinsel and show of royalty. Ryland was roused to resistance. He asserted that his sufferance alone had permitted the increase of this party. But the time for indulgences was past, and with one motion of his arm, he would sweep away the cobwebs that blinded his countrymen. When Raymond entered the coffee-room, his presence was hailed by his friends almost with a shout. They gathered round him, counted their numbers, and detailed the reasons why they were now to receive an addition of such and such members, who had not yet declared themselves. Some trifling business of the house having been gone through, the leaders took their seats in the chamber. The clamour of voices continued, till Ryland arose to speak, and then the slightest whispered observation was audible. All eyes were fixed upon him as he stood, ponderous of frame, sonorous of voice, and with the manner which, though not graceful, was impressive. I turned from his marked iron countenance to Raymond, whose face, veiled by a smile, would not betray his care. Yet his lips quivered somewhat, and his hand clasped the bench on which he sat, with a convulsive strength that made the muscles start again. Ryland began by praising the present state of the British Empire. He recalled the past years to their memory, the miserable contentions which in the time of our fathers arose almost to civil war, the abdication of the late king, and the foundation of the Republic. He described this Republic, showed how it gave privilege to each individual in the state, to rise to consequence, and even to temporary sovereignty. He compared the royal and republican spirit, showed how the one tended to enslave the mind of men, while all the institutions of the other served to raise even the meanest among us to something great and good. He showed how England had become powerful, and its inhabitants valiant and wise, by means of the freedom they enjoyed. As he spoke, every heart swelled with pride, and every cheek glowed with delight to remember that each one there was English, that each supported and contributed to the happy state of things now commemorated. Ryland's fervour increased. His eyes lighted up. His voice assumed the tone of passion. There was one man, he continued, who wished to alter all this, and bring us back to our days of impotence and contention. One man who would dare arrogate the honour which was due all who claimed England as their birthplace, and set his name and style above the name and style of the country. I saw at this juncture that Raymond changed colour. His eyes were withdrawn from the orator and cast on the ground. The listeners turned from one to the other, but in the meantime the speaker's voice filled their ears. The thunder of his denunciations influenced their senses. The very boldness of his language gave him weight. Each knew that he spoke truth, a truth known but not acknowledged. He tore from reality the mask with which he had been clothed, and the purposes of Raymond, which before had crept around, ensnaring by stealth, now stood a hunted stag, even at bay, as all perceived who watched the irrepressible changes of his countenance. Ryland ended by moving that any attempt to re-erect the kingly power should be declared treason, and he a traitor who should endeavour to change the present form of government. Cheers and loud acclamations followed the close of his speech. After his motion had been seconded, Lord Raymond rose. His countenance bland, his voice softly melodious, his manner soothing, his grace and sweetness came like the mild breathing of a flute, after the loud, organ-like voice of his adversary. He rose, he said, to speak in favour of the honourable member's motion, with one slight amendment subjoined. He was ready to go back to old times and commemorate the contests of our fathers and the monarch's abdication. Nobly and greatly, he said, had the illustrious and last sovereign of England sacrificed himself to the apparent good of his country, and divested himself of a power which could only be maintained by the blood of his subjects. These subjects named so no more. These, his friends and equals, had in gratitude conferred certain favours and distinctions on him and his family forever. An ample estate was allotted to them, and they took the first rank among the peers of Great Britain. Yet it might be conjectured that they had not forgotten their ancient heritage, and it was hard that his heir should suffer alike with any other pretender, if he attempted to regain by what ancient right and inheritance belonged to him. He did not say that he should favour such an attempt, but he did say that such an attempt would be venal, and if the aspirant did not go so far as to declare war and erect a standard in the kingdom, his fault ought to be regarded with an indulgent eye. In his amendment he proposed that an exception should be made in the bill in favour of any person who claimed the sovereign power in right of the Earls of Windsor. Nor did Raymond make an end, without drawing in vivid and glowing colours the splendour of a kingdom in opposition to the commercial spirit of republicanism. He asserted that each individual under the English monarchy was then, as now, capable of attaining higher rank and power, with only one exception, that of the function of chief magistrate, higher and nobler rank than a bartering, timorous commonwealth could afford. And for this one exception, to what did it amount? The nature of riches and influence forcibly confined the list of candidates to a few of the wealthiest, and it was much to be feared that the ill humour and contention generated by this triennial struggle would counterbalance its advantages in impartial eyes. I can ill record the flow of language and graceful turns of expression, the wit and easy raillery that gave vigour and influence to his speech. His manner, timid at first, became firm. His changeful face was lit up to superhuman brilliancy. His voice, various as music, was like that enchanting. It were useless to record the debate that followed this harangue. Party speeches were delivered, which clothed in question and cant, and veiled its simple meaning in a woven wind of words. The motion was lost. Ryland withdrew in rage and despair, and Raymond, gay and exulting, retired to dream of his future kingdom. And that's at the end of a chapter, so I think I'm going to call it there for tonight. As always, if you'd like to pick up where we've left off, you can find it on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.